Welcome to the Saturation Podcast, where we have discussions with church leaders about the life of faith and the mission of the church. My name is Levi Pancake. I serve as a local church pastor in Syracuse, New York, and we have two of those church leaders that we're going to have a discussion with today. Jason and Kyle, you've been on a previous episode. You shared a little bit more of your personal journey, but if someone only wants to listen to this one and don't care about your personal journey, maybe you can briefly introduce yourselves, and then we'll talk a bit more about what you're doing in your region of the country.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Levi. My name is Jason Malone. I'm a pastor in Greenville, South Carolina, at a church called Fellowship Greenville. And I've been pastoring for 26 years now, which I know I don't look like that. It's starting to show up in a lot of ways, isn't it? I feel it in a lot of different ways as well. But yep. That's home for me, born and raised in the upstate of South Carolina. When we say upstate, that's 10 counties. It's about 1.7, 1.8 million people. And so outside of a few years in the cornfields of Ohio at Cedarville University, where I did some schoolwork back in the day, Greenville's home for me. And we're joined today, as the co-host of this podcast, we're joined today by my good friend, Kyle. Kyle, will you tell everybody about yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Co-host. Kyle Estepp. Been in the upstate of South Carolina for 17 years with Summit Church. Grew up in Ohio and moved down there in 2007 to help Summit get started. Met this guy in those cornfields in Ohio at Cedarville University. Yep. And been going in ministry for about 23 years. And a good chunk of that down in the upstate. So good to be back.
Yeah. Well, we talked a bit about you guys planting Summit Church together, and how you fleshed out many of these SCP convictions in local context. And that's still a work in progress, as we all are. But thought today we could focus a bit on what you're doing in the region, where in the last episode we talked about equipping the saints for the work of the ministry, interdependent leadership team, how you get after that target and that geography. But you guys have done a ton when it comes to partnership, collaboration, involving other churches. You've worked with other churches to plant churches in the region. And I just think it's really encouraging, really exciting. I think there's things that church leaders can learn from it. And so I'm not exactly sure where to start, but Jason will as to what to emphasize in this aspect. But you guys are doing some unique things in the present, and just unpack that a bit.
Yeah, not to just rehash everything from the last podcast, but as you said, they might not want to listen to it, but they might. But we did talk about the theological convictions that drive so much of Saturation church planting. That whatever God's going to do in the world in redeeming a people to himself, he desires to do through all of Christ's people. We like to say, not a few select perceived spiritual superstars.
That's awesome.
Whatever God's going to do in the world in redeeming a people to himself, he desires to do primarily through a decentralized structure. By that, we mean the gospel is on the move. It goes everywhere that God wants it to go because it goes in his people, into every aspect of life. And then thirdly, whatever God's going to do in redeeming a people to himself, he'll do it through a church leadership who sees equipping people in their giftedness is just as important as using their own giftedness.
Yeah. And those convictions that you outline are the convictions that we share with leaders all over the
over the world.
And you're right to emphasize those again, because these podcasts get released every 2 weeks. Yeah. So even if they heard you said it,
say it again.
It's been 2 weeks since you said it. So thank you. Anyway, that's the setup.
Well, the reason I wanted to say that is because we also articulated in our previous podcast that if you believe these things theologically, then there will be philosophical, methodological, and strategic things that hang off of these theological convictions. An example would be you can't say theologically, be convinced of the fact that whatever God wants to do in redeeming a people to himself, he desires to do through all of Christ's people, not a few select perceived spiritual superstars. You can't say that you believe that theologically and then make the entire church about your gifting or your personality. You can't build the whole thing on your shoulders
or
if
even
you're convinced of that.
Church.
Or even that's to the point, or even that singular church. This church is God's answer to this geography. Well, we would never say that. It sounds so arrogant if you were to say that out loud. But if you actually believe it's not about our church, then there should be strategic, philosophical, methodological things you do to flesh that out. And so the church partnership piece for us was because we were convinced of these things theologically. It's not about us. So how do we have the opportunity to partner together with other gospel-centered churches in our geography to saturate a geography with the good news of Jesus Christ? The other way I talked about that was we are committed to gospel saturation in this geography through the mobilization of our church family, through their spiritual formation. So you're growing disciples who are living with a divine distinction in their circle of influence. And we're going to do that in collaboration with other churches, because it's not just about our church. And so starting that way back in 2007 led to, back, I guess it was 2019, 2020, a conversation from the church that I had left with their blessing to plant Summit Church. I had a good relational connection there with the church that I left and continued to meet with some of their leadership on a regular basis. And they were going through two different things as an elder team. One, they were trying to think about multiplication. It's a larger church numerically in the geography. Great ministry. And they're trying to think about how do we multiply ministry. And the other thing they were thinking about with their teaching pastor and directional leader who had been there for 27 years, they were trying to think of a succession plan for him as well. And so that led to a conversation about me coming back to be a part of helping them think multiplication and stepping into the directional role when the guy stepped back from that role. Now, he didn't retire. He was just going to step back from the directional leading. And so that invitation for me to come and be a part of that was extended. We began to pray about that as elders of Summit. And to be honest with you, because of the theological convictions, it was actually a fairly, say easy, like obviously this is a place I love. Yeah, you can say quick. Like, yeah, to get after the gospel saturation of a geography, you stepping into this role actually makes sense, because when I came back to Fellowship Greenville to help think about multiplication, the coming back was the elders of Fellowship and the elders of Summit desiring to launch something together to plant more churches and revitalize churches in our geography where we're all located together, which is awesome. So I've been back at Fellowship Greenville for 3 years now, and since I've gone back there as the directional pastor, Kyle and I primarily, Kyle continuing to lead along with the elders over at Summit Church, Kyle and I have been a part of, with a team, of creating something that we now refer to as the Upstate Church Collective, where we are partnering together on a few different levels, but one of those levels is to plant churches and revitalize churches in our geography. But there's other parts to that as well that actually help us get after that. That as the co-host of this podcast, Kyle, if you don't mind talking a little bit about those other aspects, because they actually do tie into the original thing that I said, gospel saturation via mobilization of the church through the spiritual formation of your people in collaboration with other churches.
Oh, we should have had that on a graphic or something.
Yeah,
It just
probably
keeps.
can't. Yeah,
I think they
the
can work it
producers can. They'll make it look great.
I think what we realized early on, the potential blessing of a vision that we've held for a long time, and other churches in our area.
That's right.
If you meet pastors that have been around for twice as long as you, many times what you find is in their heart still is a vision for what would it look like for everyone in this place. Sorry, I hit the mic. To keep.
You just made it worse by drawing attention to the fact.
Probably
you hit
so.
the mic, but
That's what I like to do, make it more awkward. But I think that's in their heart. And that was consistent every time we'd have coffees with pastors for 15 years.
Yeah.
They've always wanted to see that. It was never like they were pushing against it. It was sometimes just getting overwhelmed with how. How do we get after that? Because it's, ministry has its own needs every day. Right.
That's right.
And so I think what we began to realize is even though this was a big piece of our DNA that we cared deeply about for all those years at Summit, the need and the ability to get after seeing that come to fruition was getting harder and harder. More people moving to the area, more challenges in ministry, fewer leaders desiring, like stepping in naturally. And so it felt like this was God's potential grace of allowing us to see something we've had a vision for a long time, and Fellowship Greenville had vision for as well, maybe come to fruition more effectively by partnering together. Then once we get in there and start thinking about planting, revitalizing, coaching new churches in our area, inviting more churches to participate, we realized we have to back this into our own context to raise up leaders. We can't just trust anymore that leaders are going to come flying in from all over wanting to participate. It just doesn't happen. So you got to still raise up all of Christ's people. Right. You got to give access to that. So we really went from the highest goal of planting together, revitalizing together to saturate the geography with the gospel, and started backing up to how do we call our own people into this at Fellowship Greenville and at Summit? How do we disciple people together? How do we actually collaborate for the sake of maturing and equipping the saints to do the work of the ministry? So we created 2 other kind of tracks or pathways that we could really invite our own church members to participate in more regularly, and that would maybe help other churches in our area continue to raise up leaders as well. And the first pathway is a discipleship pathway around some key characteristics and competencies in the life of Jesus, helping them understand the whole story of God and the beauty of the good news of the gospel, which finds its really pinnacle moment in the life and death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And how do we help them understand that he's after the heart transformation, changing us from the inside out, new creations, 2 Corinthians 5, all this from God, like living in that reality that then produces a kind of people who value intimacy with God as their highest priority in life in the context of meaningful community for the sake of the world God created and loves mission. And could we get everyone thinking with that framework in their mind? And if we get everyone slowly but surely moving toward that framework, do we actually start to raise up the kind of people that could help us go plant churches, revitalize churches, start new works, start new ministries, and actually see saturation start trending in the right direction, as it were, in the Upstate?
So there's a cooperative effort among churches in your area at one track, one level to discipleship pathway.
Yeah.
To help people grow in these biblical distinctives.
Sure.
Yeah.
How many churches are we talking about working together to help do this?
Yeah. So I think that's at the beginning, it was just Summit and Fellowship. Yep. Then there were some other churches we're connected to coming into that. Mm-hmm. Then we planted a couple of churches already in that are now participating. So now you're looking at 4, 5, 6 churches actively participating in that, with that continuing to grow. Also getting it developed where for the first time heading into next year, we could give it away to churches in our area. They can run it at their place without us.
So currently the iteration is we're doing this together. You're doing classes together, the curriculum's together, but
it's already starting to get out. Yep. And so I do think that potential's there.
Yeah.
And I failed to mention that there's the second track is then taking people out of that phase who feel like God may be calling them into greater responsibility or leadership in their local context. And it's called LEAD. Mm-hmm. And it's a desire to help equip leaders within the local context that maybe just continue to help raise the bar of discipleship and equipping in your own place. Or maybe they jump in and go with these new plants and revitalization works as they continue to get developed. So the goal would be multiple churches throughout the Upstate are now going to get invited into access to the discipleship resources, the leadership resources, and invited to think better about how do we keep planting.
Yeah. And maybe this is super obvious, but just for the sake of trying to make the point. If our desire is saturation, and we know that at the heart of getting at saturation is a divinely distinct people, the spiritual formation of your people, well, that's imperative. So spending time there, I mean, the things that Kyle just ran through, story, gospel, heart, intimacy, community, mission. Yeah. If the majority of our people are taking baby steps in those things, then I think that shapes mobilization, which helps us get after gospel saturation, and to be able to do it together, collaboration. That actually makes a geography like the upstate of South Carolina lean in and take notice a little bit. You mean churches are working together? So when we first started Summit back in 2007, if we could just get people to do some service projects together in the community, that kind of made people go, oh, because in the South, it can continue to be at times a little competitive. Churches are seen as competitors instead of collaborators. So
say in the South, I was talking with Miguel, who's further south than you in Central America. He said the same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah. So I think it's just the nature of churches
Over time, though, that became a little bit more like, okay, yeah, we'll partner with you to do good in the city, however you want to define that. And so, which I was super thankful for. Wherever we can begin, I'll begin. But what began to change over time is a few people maybe would begin to talk about planting churches together. Oh, that made people go, oh, churches are working together to plant churches. Yeah. But now with this layer of, we're actually getting churches together to talk about agreed upon discipleship pathways for our people, because we know that has the potential to be, in a lot of ways, a feeder system into multiplication through planting and revitalizing. That is making a lot of people in this season go, huh, tell me a little bit more about that. Maybe skeptical like they were back in the day when we were trying to talk about how to come together to do good works in the city, that over time they're like, okay, yeah, I see how this works. That's been a neat piece to be able to figure out in this season and talk about, and hopefully winsomely call people to give some time to think about in regards to discipling together. Again, the bullseye behind all of that is the reason, which is gospel saturation. So the Upstate Church Collective is working intentionally to disciple people while also raising up lay leaders to serve within their local churches, and out of that pathway, potentially find some people that the Lord's leading to plant churches and revitalize churches. And if not, that's okay. It's definitely not time wasted raising up lay leaders in your local church and making disciples. That's what we're called to do anyway.
Right. Yeah.
So, but that is a little bit of a different, if you're out there listening today and you're a church planting kind of person, or that's what you give yourself to us, this was taking a different swing at what had previously been done, which is in a lot of places, which is church planting residency, take in some guy from Des Moines, Iowa, not that there's anything wrong with that, and you've got no track record with him, and he comes in and you invest, a little bit of time and sometimes a whole lot of money, but there's been no runway with him. Think of the potential runway you have with someone who's coming through a year-long discipleship track, a year-long lay leadership development track, and an 18-month to 24-month church planting track. Okay. Like there's been something that a lot of people, 100%, a lot of people have been able to invest and speak into that. And again, that's not foolproof that you have success in planting a church, but it is our thought process of maybe, just maybe, this geography that we care about, that the Lord cares about it even more than us in regards to the gospel here. And maybe, just maybe, the Lord has already brought into our midst the people who would be a part of continuing to saturate this geography with the good news of Jesus, whether it be as a disciple of Jesus, a lay leader in a local church for Jesus, or church planting, church revitalization. That's our swing at it in this season.
Yeah, I think, interestingly enough, it feels like it had to slow down again a little bit.
Yeah.
3 or 4 years, it's like, are we multiplying or not? Because it's going to take time. But I think the desire is the more we internalize raising up people from within, the more we equip people from within, that maybe, just maybe, it would compound over time. So it kind of slowed back down a little bit, and it wasn't this grand, hey, we got to plant 30 churches in the next.
Right.
It became more, can we keep raising up the right kind of people in the right places, and say, maybe we do get 10 years down the road and we have 3 times as many churches as we did that are thinking about this in a really healthy way. And I think it was also making sure we were building something that was worth inviting people into.
That's right.
And worth sharing with other churches in our midst that might serve them, not tell them how to do it.
That's exactly right.
Well, I love how you framed a little bit of the shift of, rather than having the goal of we're going to plant X amount of churches in this time span, let's focus on raising up equipping all the saints for the work of the ministry.
Yes.
Helping them grow in the life of faith, mission of the church, raising up leaders. 1 Timothy 3:1. He desires to be an elder is a good thing. That aspiration is good.
Yeah.
And so lean into that, help people grow in that. And so by focusing on that, the natural outcome of that will be more church leaders, healthier churches, more faithful churches, revitalized churches, church plants, because the Spirit of God's
what we're
working
banking
through
on.
it. Yeah. And but all of that then gets after this outcome of making the gospel accessible.
Yeah.
Or saturating this geography with access to the gospel through the people of God, with these healthy churches as these beachheads or these lighthouses that are mobilizing them and equipping them to go out.
100%. It gets back to, I think, one of the things that was so helpful for me early on in this DNA is redefining what success is.
Yeah.
What do we want to actually hold on to?
Yep.
Maybe measure, maybe call success. And I think that helps set the pace. Like if you're faithful to these things and you do start to see them go out, but they don't expand as fast as you want, as big as you want, or multiply as quick as you want, but they stay healthy.
Yeah.
They stay committed to these values and outcomes. You continue to see people raised up who hold dear intimacy with God, living in meaningful community, stewarding their lives, sharing their great story. Like those kinds of things stay present. I'll lay my head down all night, at night peacefully, and I will continue to think, man, God's doing something we could have never done apart from Him.
Yeah. So what you guys are describing, I mean, it's encouraging, it's exciting, it looks even like pretty big, pretty developed. So I'm thinking of someone who's listening and maybe they're alone, they're part of a team, it's a smaller church, but they know that they want to collaborate, they want to work with other churches in their region. Would you have any advice or counsel about 1, 2, 3 just initial steps that they could do, recognizing we need others. We'd love to maybe get there, what you're talking about 10 years from now. What can I actually do next week towards some of this?
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, co-host.
You want me to rephrase the question of the co-host?
I know. I like to try to think back to what that felt like when we first, for most of us, Dwight looked at us and said, "How are you going to reach everybody like they're doing in India or Cuba?" And I'm like, "Listen, they work harder than us. They think better than us. They probably don't get bound down too quickly by systems or dollars and there's something to be envied there in one sense that I'm thankful for. Global perspective keeps us pushing forward because we realize in many ways they are outpacing us in multiplication. And but I think it's as simple as what you said, where you said, what can they start with today or this week? And as I look back now, going on 17, 18 years ago, what felt pointless was really critical. Face-to-face with other pastors in our city around coffee tables. Not big gatherings to try to cast a vision for something that wasn't feasible. We did a lot of that.
We did.
Honestly, the fruit of that wasn't nearly as effective as going to meet with pastors in their circle, their context, buying them a cup of coffee, asking how we could pray for them and how they were doing, and then actually praying for them on Sunday in the church service and celebrating their ministry with our people. Like that was step one.
That's really good.
And I think there were years of those coffees that felt like we weren't getting anywhere, that the fruit of those conversations and that time, and Dwight talks a lot about time and relationship, whether it's discipleship, whether it's planting, whether it's collaboration, he was always saying, don't burn bridges, keep having the conversation, keep dreaming about it, keep praying for it, keep thinking it could happen.
Yeah.
And
prioritizing it on our calendar. Like, Kyle and I, it was just every Thursday was meet with other pastors day. And sometimes pastors would want to get together.
Still is.
Yeah, sometimes it is. Sometimes pastors would want to get together with us. They would reach out and we would go, all right, next available Thursday slot, you're in and we're having coffee. And at the same time, that was us too. Like we were asking to meet with other guys, wanting to get to know other guys around us and their teams. And so we would just say, hey, can we take you to coffee?
Yeah.
And I pray that it was always with the posture of, hey, will you tell us what God's doing in your midst kind of idea. A pastor to the pastor.
Leading with the assumption he was at work.
100%.
Like we weren't coming in to do something you're not doing. We're not here because you're not doing, like trying to.
Yeah, even when we planted another congregation of Summit through the years, before we officially started that congregation, we would meet with pastors in that area and talk with them and ask those same kind of questions, assuming that the Lord was doing the work there in this geography and we want to join in on that. I think that becomes a big piece of it.
Well, the thing I like about the types of questions you're asking with these other pastors, especially in the earlier days, there's nothing presumptuous about it. I think sometimes other church leaders don't want to pick up the phone or send the email to the other pastors. Like, it sounds presumptuous. They're going to think I want something, they don't have time for it. There's nothing presumptuous about, tell me what God's doing. How can I pray for you?
That's right.
How can we pray
How's your
for
family?
you? How's
your family?
How's your family?
Yep.
And maybe they're doing great. Maybe they have other people speaking in their lives. Maybe they don't respond to the email or phone call.
Right.
But
if you'll take once a month in a worship service and pray for another church that's right around the corner from you. Like I talked to the pastor this week. Here's 3 ways we can be praying for this church and this church family. I mean, that shifts the culture and the dynamic of your place really, really quickly in a really, really healthy way from our perspective.
Because we need others to reach the geography.
Yeah.
If that other church is not healthy, is not taking spiritual responsibility, then darn it, that means we need to do it. So we need them to do it.
And what happened over time is then these pastors, and we weren't trying to play them, just genuine friendship led to them asking questions. Talk to me more about how you guys talk about interdependency. I'll tell you the question we got the most. The question we got the most is, how do you have time to do what you're doing with me right now? Like, thanks for having coffee with me. Why are you doing it? And how are you doing that with everything else that you have going on? Well, let's start. At that point, we start talking about the convictions. Because again, I keep saying it, if they are theological convictions, there should be philosophical, methodological, strategic things that hang off of them. Calling up a pastor and having coffee is a piece of that. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I care about you because I care about this geography. You're in this geography. You're a co-laborer. And then those conversations become much more natural.
And then I think it's on us. It became imperative for us. If you found somebody who's like, I want these things, I care about these things, I'm out here swinging at it in my own context by myself, where we had means, we were trying to help them do something in that circle or with us, but not with our name on it or not even being known for that. So that as much as you can posture them to be successful in their circle or pull something off they have a vision for and collaborate with them, but not put your name on it was really life-giving. We'd go feed teachers or whatever we were trying to do in the circle. And it would just, on the back, the church of the Upstate loves you, or these 5 churches wanted you to, even if at the early stage, even if Summit was paying the whole bill for that, and we didn't have a lot either, it didn't matter. Like that, it was trying to show them we really are here to be with you in this.
When you guys have been at it now 17 years?
Yeah.
It's appropriate and natural that the structure has developed more.
Yeah.
Some of the expectations, some of what you're inviting people into has developed over time. And that's a great grace and a wonderful thing.
It is.
And at the same time, getting back to some of those basics is also it's a good reminder, at least for me, as I'm hearing you guys talk, thinking of our own local context.
Yeah.
Jason,
Levi, as we wrap up our podcast today, because I've been keeping my eye on the timer.
As you should.
It's time.
It's time.
How would you like to close us out and wrap us up today?
Well, I think of just a very hard, abrupt ending.
Okay.
That is unnatural and a little bit awkward would be the best way to
That's amazing.
be keeping with the theme.
I love it.
This is big.
Till next time.
See ya.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Saturation Podcast, where we have discussions with church leaders about the life of faith and mission of the church. This podcast is produced by Saturation Church Planting. Saturation Church Planting exists to glorify God through partnering with church leaders in nations, regions, cities throughout the world towards the full evangelization of those places through the mobilization of the church. For more information, please visit scpglobal.org.